A world-first report by Asthma Australia has revealed the impact things such as mould, gas cooktops and pests are having on people's health. To break down this report, I'm joined by Asthma Australia Director Nigel Cooper. Nigel, thanks so much for your time. Tell us a little bit about some of the findings of this new report.
Well, this report was, as you said, was a world first, and it's something that we're quite surprised by. We surveyed over 5,000 people in July last year, and what we found with that survey was that 48% of people said they used cooktops, gas cooktops, for cooking their food. And we know that gas produces harmful emissions for people with asthma that can trigger asthma and cause asthma. So that was 48% of people use cooktops. 50% of people said that in the last 12 months that had issues with dampness and mould in their home. And considering the amount of rain that we've had, that's probably not surprising. But once again, we know mould and mould spores impact negatively upon people with asthma and their health, but also just in general health and well-being. And the survey also showed that 70% of people in Australia said they'd had issues with pests. So these are things like cockroaches and mice. And we know, again, that they produce powerful allergens that can actually impact asthma and worsen health. So we think our homes are incredibly healthy and safe places. And the report actually showed that for some people, like people with asthma, maybe our homes aren't as healthy and as safe as what we think.
Just how concerned are you by the results of this report?
Well, we are quite concerned because the other stat that came up that was quite interesting was that of a third of people actually said that being at home, their asthma was worsened. So if you're in your home environment and your asthma is actually worse, we spend so much time in our home. And the other thing that I guess is concerning as well as we think about our homes and our cooking, and cooking can be quite a social event. So we can have our children and our family around us while we're cooking, and unknowingly we're exposing them to harmful emissions that can actually, one, contribute to causing asthma, but also exacerbating or worsening their asthma.
And as you mentioned, the recent La Nina weather pattern has played a large part in the number of people reporting mould in their homes. What can people do to minimise the risk of mould, and how should they be treating it if they do find mould around the home?
Yeah, sure. Look, you're spot on. With all the rain that we've had, we're getting people telling us that mould has become a real issue for them. The thing about mould that is concerning as well is that it can be quite hidden. So people need to look behind their couches, behind their curtains, their carpet. So mould can actually be hidden and you can't see it. And generally, you can't often smell it. Sometimes you can, but you can't always smell it. So you can't trust that. And as we know, mould is a significant trigger for people with asthma. So the best way to deal with it is, one, fix any water leaks. So if you have water leaking in your home from a roof or windows, get those leaks fixed. And if you're in a rental, then speak to your landlord and get those fixed as soon as possible. Also, it's important to keep the homes well ventilated. So making sure that we have doors and windows open and fresh air going through the home. And dehumidifiers can also be useful to sort of reduce the dampness that's in the air. For people, if you do have asthma, if you do have mould in your home, we would say for people with asthma, don't you clean it. Let somebody else clean that mould away. And what we'd suggest is don't use harsh chemicals like bleaches, etc., but just use things like vinegar and water to clean that mould off. And when you are cleaning it, wear a P2 mask as well. So you're reducing the impact of those mould spores on your own respiratory health as well.
That is some great advice. The survey also highlights, as you mentioned before, that there needs to be more done to raise awareness around cooking with gas. What exactly are the risks that are associated?
Well, we know that cooking with gas appliances and also unflued gas heaters produce harmful emissions like nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde. And we know that these are actually linked to causing asthma, but also contributing to exacerbating or worsening asthma. So there are some steps that we can do. We'd certainly recommend you always use your range hood when you are cooking, and also open and ventilate your kitchen area so that you're venting the emissions away. We'd also encourage families. This is where it's a bit surprising. Our kitchens are the heart of our home. So when we're cooking, we often have our family around us. So we just say, if you have gas appliances, maybe don't have young children around you in the kitchen, around the cooktop while you're cooking. And if people can afford it, to replace their gas cooktops with electric appliances, like conduction, for example. And we know that is actually a barrier for many people who can't afford to shift to a different appliance, or they don't actually own their home. So that's very difficult, again, to get their landlord perhaps to actually replace an appliance.
Yeah, well, that brings me to my next point is that many people are renting at the moment. They don't own their homes, and so
Mm,
it's not up to
mm,
them to change these appliances or fix
mm.
any of these things. How do we get around this, and what more can be done to help people make the switch?
Yeah, great. Look, 35% of people in our survey said exactly that. They don't actually own their home, they're in a rental. And of that 35%, some were also concerned that if they went to their landlord and they complained about a leaking roof and mould or wanting to switch the cooktops over, that it might actually go against them. So there was some fear. And especially in this tight rental market, we can understand that some people are quite fearful. 25% of people who owned the home also said financially the switch to electrical appliances was out of their reach, as was dehumidifiers and air purifiers. So I guess our primary voice would be to create some kind of incentive for landlords so that landlords can actually get some funding to support the switching over of appliances. And also for people who are low socioeconomic, for example, disadvantaged backgrounds, some financial support for those to actually switch out those appliances would be fantastic, and as well as maybe some home maintenance support when you've got leaking roof and you've got mould as a major issue. And we also mustn't forget social housing. So we know a lot of people are in social housing, and we need to ensure that old housing stock is switched over from those appliances and that they're regularly maintained. But also for new housing stock, that they consider using all electric appliances as well, so that we reduce the effect of gas emissions in the home.
All right, some great advice and points there, Nigel Cooper. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
No problem. Thank you for having me.